Hello ladies and gentlemen and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host Brett Murphy, and for today's video it is going to be another retro review. And I am going to be reviewing both The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So you may be wondering, why am I reviewing both of these movies at the exact same time? And the answer is quite simple. I basically just ran out of time before the release of No Way Home. So I figured, why not just lump them together? Now you may also be wondering, where are the Sam Raimi movies? Well, I actually did retro reviews for those a few years back. Yes, if you go and watch those videos, they are a bit rough around the edges because I released them in the first year of my channel's existence, so you're talking like old camera, old microphone, old room, and just set up entirely. So yeah, they are a bit rough around the edges, but I did go back and watch them before doing these videos, and I do still stand by the vast majority of my opinions on those three. Before we get into the actual reviews themselves, I just wanted to let you all know that I have an entire playlist dedicated to all of my retro reviews. And in that playlist is where you can find my retro reviews for Sam Raimi's trilogy. But aside from those three, just be sure to check out the playlist in general if you enjoy retro movie reviews. I guarantee in there you'll find something you like. And so, without further ado, let's hop right into things. Okay, so first things first, the original 2012 Amazing Spider-Man. And I'll start out by saying that probably the best thing about this movie is that it does a great job at setting it apart from Raimi's original trilogy. Everything just looks and feels different, from New York City itself to Spider-Man and his suit, which is something that this new team absolutely had to nail. They absolutely could not afford for these movies to feel like carbon copies. The next big thing, and actually this may be the best thing about this movie, is Peter and Gwen's relationship. I just love it. They're both quirky, weird, and awkward, and just perfect for each other. Yes, this movie does use a lot more CGI than Sam Raimi's original 3, but I actually didn't find the increased use of CGI to be all that bad. But instead it actually allows Spider-Man to do a lot more spider-like things than he could in the Raimi movies. Not to mention there's still a lot of practical effects used in this first flick. I've always admired that this series of Spider-Man's films put an extra focus on Peter's parents. I enjoy that extra little look that we got into his backstory that we never really explored before. And I do enjoy the look back more in this movie than I do the sequel, because I find this one still maintains a lot of that mysticism. There's also just a lot of mini positives that I have with this first movie. Like how it shows us more of Spider-Man's relationship with the police. It's got a lot more high school stuff, and the first-person Spider-Man action is beyond cool. I've actually always found that Lizard is a pretty solid villain with understandable enough motives. No, I don't agree with him wanting to turn all of New York City into lizard people, but I understand why he's experimenting on himself and how he goes mad. Okay, sure, we could have spent a bit more time with him, and I know that there are deleted scenes out there that help to better flesh the character out, but I still enjoyed what we got, and I felt that Riz Ifans did very well in the role. It's also a very underrated score from James Horner, who sadly passed away in 2015 and did not do the sequel. Now also seems like a good time for me to point out that I like pretty much all of the supporting cast. Dennis O'Leary as Captain Stacy, Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben, Sally Field as Aunt May, and the late Irfan Khan. They all do such wonderful jobs in their respective roles. The last positive I have is the bridge scene, where Spider-Man saves the kid out of the falling, burning vehicle. In my mind, it is easily one of the purest Spider-Man moments there is. And now for the negatives, and the first one, and probably biggest one with this first flick, is that I find it can actually be a bit slow. Don't get me wrong, I understand that movies need their downtime, and I don't dislike slow movies, but if it's a slow movie, it needs to maintain my interest. And sadly, there are a few moments in here during that downtime that really just don't. And I kind of just wanted to get to the next Spidey bit. I would say this is likely because the first half of the movie is all origin story, really. So it feels a little been here, done that. For the next negative, I realized that they also kind of just dropped the whole hunting down Uncle Ben's killer thing. I understand that's just Peter growing and maturing, but I feel it's just kind of abruptly left behind. Next is that the Lizard's CGI is rough. The face in particular, and the eyes even more in particular, just really have not aged well. In fact, I don't know if they were ever really that good. And the last negative I have to discuss is just that I have a bunch of little nitpicks with this movie. Just a few little things that really make no sense, like why at the end of the movie would Gwen not just destroy that machine rather than hiding with it in a locker? Or the fact that I found that these movies put a huge emphasis on Peter's spider sense, and it is very, very on and off in this first flick. All in all though, I actually really do enjoy the first Amazing Spider-Man movie. I remember back when it first released in 2012, I saw it 2 days in a row. I liked it that much. Although my love for it has dwindled over the years into just really liking it, I still do think that it is a solid reboot for the character. And with that being said, I'm going to be giving the first Amazing Spider-Man a 7.5 out of 10. And now, just like that, we move into The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The first positive that I wanted to discuss is that, in my eyes, this is the best looking Spider-Man movie. Or at the very least, the most visually interesting of all of them. Once again though, probably the best aspect of this movie, as I believe it's probably the best aspect of both of these movies, is Gwen and Peter's relationship / Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone's chemistry. This is also probably the best live action suit that we've gotten. And I love the little details like how it ripples in the wind when Peter is traveling at high speeds. Despite James Horner not returning to score this second feature, it has a very diverse and layered score. That's probably though because it has 6 people composing it. But in all honesty, I love it, and it is one of my favorite superhero scores in recent memory. Okay, call me crazy, but I actually really dig Electro's look. I have no idea why people are saying they prefer his look in No Way Home when it's basically just a guy in a suit. I love the blue look. I love how he's nearly transparent and you can see his veins and the lightning pulsing through his body. I love how it can change colors based on his mood and how much energy he's absorbed. And eventually, I love his abilities like how he can teleport. It's all just so badass and very visually pleasing. And definitely the superior version of the character in terms of looks at the very least. I've also always enjoyed the increased comedy in this one, both in terms of Spider-Man being much quippier and just the simple throwaway jokes like the "oh, I was cleaning the chimney" and the "Peter, we have no chimney." Aunt May's "you're my boy" speech hits right at home, and it is delivered with such grace and power by Sally Field. Gwen's death is so unbelievably devastating and effective. The build-up is nail-biting, Peter's reaction is truly heartbreaking, and then they add in the little montage showing Peter no longer being Spider-Man and visiting Gwen's grave throughout the seasons is a total and absolute gut punch. And the last little positive that I have for this second flick is the kid at the end in his Spider-Man costume, standing up to Rhino since the real Spider-Man is no longer around after Spider-Man saved him from a couple of bullies earlier on in the movie. It was just simply a stroke of genius. These two movies have some of the most true and genuine Spider-Man moments of all of the Spider-Man movies, this being one of the standouts. For this one, I actually do have a couple of middle ground points, which means they're not negatives nor positives either. The first being the idea for Max, aka Electro's character, is actually good. I know a lot of people like to make fun of it, but those people have to understand that there are lots of people out there who feel that way, who feel unseen and brushed aside by society. So I can understand when Spider-Man says that to someone like that he would become obsessed with this character, and when they kind of just disregard him too, and he now has these powers, yeah, I kind of think he would snap. But sadly, they just executed so poorly, which kind of led to it being a big joke. And the only other middle ground point I have is Peter's PTSD with Captain Stacy. Starts off fairly strong. We get a few instances of it very early on, but then it kind of just fades away until the end. And then of course we know he turns out to be right because Gwen dies. And now for the negatives of this movie. What a waste. What a waste of so many great characters and actors. Paul Giamatti as Rhino, Chris Cooper as Norman Osborn, BJ Novak as Alistair Smythe, Felicity Jones as Felicia Hardy, and lastly but certainly not least, Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn, aka the Green Goblin. Look, don't get me wrong, I think Dane DeHaan is a great actor. Just watch Chronicle if you want to know what I'm talking about. But he was absolutely undeniably not the right fit for this role. And his transition into the Green Goblin is so painfully shoehorned in at the last second. The next negative is the flip-floppy Gwen and Peter relationship. Don't get me wrong, I still believe this is the best aspect of this movie because I love these characters and these actors together. They just work so well. It's just so on again, off again throughout the entire movie that it actually gets on my nerves despite my love for their dynamic. I get what they were going for by trying to add more to Peter's parents' backstory, but it just really doesn't feel necessary to me. Little flashbacks here and there are actually quite nice, and that's all I really need. just seeing some of Peter's favorite memories with his parents. And maybe, just maybe, I would feel differently about this whole side of this movie if we actually got a third Amazing Spider-Man movie and things kind of came full circle. But in this movie, it just kind of feels super unnecessary. Also, for this movie to only mention the Bugle and J. Jonah Jameson by name dropping them and not actually showing them feels like an absolute slap in the face. At the end of it all, this movie's biggest flaw is its lack of focus. It is all over the place. You have Peter and Gwen's relationship, Gwen trying to go off to Oxford, Electro and his whole story, Harry and his whole story, Peter's parents. There's just way too much going on. Oh, and not to mention trying to set up the Sinister Six. They should have focused just on Electro as the one and only villain. Cut out Harry Osborn, cut out Rhino, cut out all of Peter's parents' stuff, and instead just had one villain, and then focused more on Peter and his life, trying to find that balance between Peter and Spider-Man and between Peter and Gwen. Now, with all of that being said, because I know I went on a bit longer about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 than 1, I still do really enjoy this movie. The positives that I have with it are pretty big positives, despite the negatives being pretty big negatives. And therefore, I'm going to be giving The Amazing Spider-Man 2 a 6.5 out of 10. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my reviews on The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And while you're at it, feel free to let me know what you would score both of these movies out of 10 and what your favorite moment is from each of them. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe. Thank you so much for watching. And that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you. And while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.